Commander Velthus stood in the observation tower overlooking what the humans once called Sydney. The ruins stretched for kilometers, covered in the sleek metal structures the Crithian Dominion had built over 3 centuries. He sipped his morning stimulant and watched the sun rise over the Pacific Ocean, feeling satisfied. Earth was theirs. It had been theirs for so long that the humans were just a footnote in history files. The alarm changed everything. "Commander, we have readings at the edge of the system," his sensor officer called out, her voice tight with confusion. "Multiple contacts. Thousands of them." Velthus set down his cup and walked to the main display. The screen showed dots appearing out of faster-than-light travel, blooming like flowers across the dark space beyond the outer planets. His breath caught. "There were so many. Identification?" he asked. "The signatures are old, sir. Ancient human design. But the power readings don't match our records. These ships are putting out energy levels far beyond what humans could manage when they fled." Velthus felt a cold sensation in his chest. "That's impossible. The humans died out centuries ago. Everyone knows this." The sensor officer looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, I'm just telling you what the sensors show." A communication request flashed across all frequencies. Velthus authorized it, expecting some kind of salvage operation or perhaps pirates using old human hulls. What came through made his blood run cold. The message was simple, broadcast in Old Earth languages and translated into Crithian. A woman's voice, calm and absolute. "This is Fleet Admiral Sarah Chunocuffer of the United Human Expeditionary Fleet. We've come home. You have 72 hours to evacuate Earth and all human settlements in the Sol system. This is your only warning." The image that accompanied the transmission showed a human woman in a dark blue uniform, her hair gray, her eyes hard as stone. Behind her, through a viewport, Velthus could see ships. So many ships that they blocked out the stars. "Get me High Command," Velthus said quietly. "Get me everyone." Within hours, the Crithian response was decided. The High Imperatrix herself addressed the commanders across Earth's defensive network. Her image filled every screen, her crest feathers raised in defiance. "These are refugees," she declared. "Desperate remnants clinging to old ships and older dreams. They fled Earth because they were weak. They will find us strong. We have built Earth into a fortress. We have 500 warships in orbit and thousands more within reach. Send the intercept fleet. Destroy them. Show them what happens when the conquered try to reclaim what they lost." Admiral Corthex led the intercept fleet personally. He was a decorated commander with 40 years of experience and victories in a dozen systems. As his 500 warships accelerated toward the human fleet, he studied the enemy formations with professional interest. "They're arranged in sphere formations," his tactical officer noted. "Defensive positioning. They're scared." Corthex wasn't so sure. Something about the calm way those ships held position bothered him. They weren't running. They weren't even moving to meet the Crithian fleet. They were just waiting. "All ships weapons free when in range," Corthex ordered. "Target the larger vessels first. Break their command structure. The fleet's close to firing range." Corthex gave the order to fire. Thousands of energy beams and missiles leaped across the dark space between the fleets. He watched the sensors waiting to see the human ships explode. They didn't. The human ships had shields. But not like any shields Corthex had seen. The energy weapons simply stopped, absorbed into barriers that shimmered with strange colors. The missiles exploded against invisible walls. Their fury dissipating harmlessly. Then the humans returned fire. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations, though not in the way Corthex would have wanted. The human weapons were kinetic, physical projectiles accelerated to impossible speeds. They punched through Crithian shields like they weren't there. Each shot was precisely aimed, precisely calculated. Ships didn't just Euro, they were surgically destroyed, their reactors hit, their command centers eliminated, their weapons disabled. Corthex watched in horror as his fleet was dismantled around him. Ships exploded one after another in a brutal, efficient massacre. He tried to order a retreat, but the communication systems were jammed. He tried to maneuver, but his ship shuddered as something struck the engines. Through his viewport, he saw a human ship approaching. It was sleek and dark, covered in armor that seemed to drink in light. As it drew closer, Cortex could see markings on its hull, a blue sphere wrapped in white clouds. Earth. They had carried that image for over 300 years. His ship was caught in a tractor beam. Emergency systems failed one by one. Cortex realized he was being taken alive. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Of the 500 Crythian warships, 497 were destroyed. 3 were captured, including Cortex's flagship. Not a single human ship was even damaged. Back on Earth, Commander Velthus watched the sensor displays with shaking hands. The dots representing the intercept fleet simply vanished from the screens, one after another, like candles being snuffed out. Then the human fleet began to move, accelerating toward Earth with terrifying purpose. "Send everything," Velthus whispered. "Call in every fleet we have. They're really coming." Across the Crythian Empire, emergency signals went out. This was supposed to be impossible. Humans were weak, scattered, broken. Everyone knew this. It was taught in schools. It was written in history, but the sensors didn't lie. The wreckage floating in space didn't lie. And the message that Admiral Tranokapher broadcast again, now to Earth itself, carried a weight that no one could deny. "We are the children of Earth," she said, her voice reaching every receiver on the planet. "For 312 years we wandered the dark. We lived on ships. We died on ships. Our children were born and grew old without ever touching soil or breathing real air. We forgot what rain felt like. We forgot the smell of forests and the sound of oceans. But we never forgot where we came from. We never forgot what was taken from us." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was harder than steel. "You built your cities on our graves. You raised your children in our homes. You looked at our skies and called them yours. But Earth remembers her children. And we have come to remind you that humans don't give up. We don't forget. And we never, ever stop fighting for what is ours." The image changed, showing not Admiral Tranokapher but the human fleet. There were thousands of ships. They moved with perfect coordination, a ballet of metal and purpose spanning millions of kilometers. They had spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. They had built, learned, adapted, and evolved with one single goal burning in every human heart, to go home. Commander Velthus looked at the displays, showing Earth's defenses. Thousands of platforms, orbital cannons, shield generators, and defensive stations built over centuries. It had taken the Crythian Dominion 300 years to conquer and fortify Earth. He wondered how long it would take the humans to take it back, somewhere deep in his mind. He already knew the answer, not long at all. The Imperatrix stood before the holographic display showing Earth and its surrounding space. Her command council surrounded her, their faces showing various degrees of fear and defiance. She would not tolerate the fear. "We are the Crythian Dominion," she announced, her voice cutting through the worried murmurs. "We have held 100 worlds. We will not lose Earth to these refugees." High Admiral Corthan, the most experienced military mind in the Dominion, stepped forward. "Your Radiance, with respect, these are not the same humans who fled 3 centuries ago. The battle at the system's edge proved that." "We must consider we must consider victory," the Imperatrix interrupted. "Activate the full orbital defense network. Call in the 5th, 7th, and 9th fleets from the neighboring systems. We will show these humans what it means to challenge the Dominion." The orders went out across faster-than-light communications. Within hours, Crythian reinforcements began arriving from nearby star systems. What started as a defensive force of a few thousand ships grew to nearly 10,000. The largest fleet the Dominion had assembled in 50 years. All gathering around Earth. The orbital defense network came fully online. 300 years of fortification hummed with power. Energy shields that could deflect asteroids, cannons that could crack moons, missile platforms that could blanket space with fire. Earth had been transformed into the most heavily defended world in Crithian space. Admiral Corthan watched the human fleet approach and felt his confidence waver. They came slowly, methodically, their formation perfect. They seemed completely unconcerned by the massive show of force arrayed against them. "All ships, all platforms," he commanded. "When they enter range, fire everything." The humans reached firing range. The order was given. Space itself seemed to ignite as thousands of weapons fired simultaneously. Energy beams thick as buildings lanced out. Missiles filled the void like a swarm of angry insects. The bombardment was so intense that sensors were overwhelmed by the energy signatures. When the light faded, the human fleet was still there. Every ship intact. "Impossible," someone whispered on the command channel. Then the humans began their work. What followed wasn't a battle in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration. The human fleet divided into dozens of smaller groups, each targeting specific sections of the defensive network. They moved with a coordination that suggested not just good communication, but something far more advanced. It was as if every ship knew what every other ship was doing at all times. A defense platform would fire. A human ship would calculate the trajectory, dodge with impossible precision, and return fire. The kinetic rounds they used punched through Crithian shields and armor like they were paper. One shot, one kill. Every time Admiral Corthan tried every tactic he knew. He sent ships in mass charges. The humans scattered them with precise targeting. He tried to overwhelm individual human ships with numbers. The humans' point defense systems destroyed everything that came close. He attempted surprise flanking maneuvers. The humans seemed to know where he would attack before he gave the orders. "They have some kind of prediction algorithm," his tactical officer reported. "Their computers are analyzing our formations and anticipating our moves. I've never seen processing power like this." Corthan watched another dozen defense platforms explode. Where did they get this technology? Nobody had an answer. But Admiral Sarah Chunokoffer provided one anyway, broadcasting across all channels. "You want to know where we got this?" Her voice echoed through the Crithian fleet. "We built it. We built it while floating in the dark between stars. We built it while our children died from diseases we couldn't cure. We built it while rationing air and water and hope. Every generation added something. Every generation made us stronger. You had 300 years to grow comfortable on our world. We had 300 years to grow hungry for it." She paused, and Corthan could hear something in her voice that terrified him more than the weapons. It was certainty. Absolute, uncheckable certainty. "We didn't just survive out there," Chunokoffer continued. "We evolved. We unified. Every human, every ship, every resource focused on one goal. We became something you can't understand because you've never had to. We became a species that knows what it means to lose everything." A Crithian admiral named Velkar, commanding a battle group near Luna, decided he'd had enough. He'd watched this systematic destruction for 6 hours. His ships were intact, his weapons charged, and he was tired of being picked apart. "All ships with me," he ordered. "Full speed at their flagship. If we can kill their admiral, we can break them." 50 ships accelerated toward the large human vessel at the center of the fleet. It was bigger than the others, clearly the command ship. Velkor armed every weapon his ships had. This would be a kamikaze run if necessary. Better to die with honor than to be slowly dismantled. The human flagship didn't move. Didn't even seem to react. Velkor's ships closed to point-blank range. He gave the order to fire. Every ship unleashed everything at once. The flagship's shields flared with colors that shouldn't exist. The bombardment that could have destroyed a small moon simply disappeared into those shields, absorbed completely. Then the flagship fired once, a single kinetic round, massive and accelerated to a fraction of light speed, passed through Velkor's entire formation. The shockwave alone shattered hulls. 47 of his 50 ships were destroyed instantly. The remaining 3, including his own, were caught in tractor beams. Velkor found himself being pulled toward the human flagship, his weapons dead, his engines offline. He expected death. He got something worse, a conversation. Admiral Chunokuffer appeared on his screen. She looked tired. Not physically, but tired in the way someone becomes when they've carried a burden for too long. Admiral Velker, she said, somehow knowing his name. Do you have children? The question surprised him. Yes, 2 daughters. I was born on a generation ship called the Remembrance, Chunokuffer said. I never saw Earth, my mother never saw Earth, my grandmother saw it once. When she was 3 years old, during the evacuation, she told me about blue skies before she died. I was 40 before I understood what she meant. Do you know what it's like to dream about something you've never seen? To ache for a home you've never known? Velker said nothing. You took our world, Chunokuffer continued, her voice soft but carrying steel underneath. You made us into wanderers. You thought we would fade away, die out, become nothing. She leaned forward. But you gave us something more dangerous than weapons. You gave us purpose. You gave us 300 years to think about nothing but coming home. You created an enemy that doesn't know how to quit. She gestured, and Velker's ship was released. Go, she said. Tell your Imperatrix. Tell your High Command. Tell everyone. Earth belongs to humanity. It always did. It always will. And nothing you have can stop us from taking it back. Velker's ship limped away, and he carried that message back to the fleet. By the time 36 hours had passed, the orbital defense network was gone. Not damaged, gone. Every platform, every cannon, every shield generator had been systematically destroyed. The human fleet hadn't lost a single ship. They hadn't even appeared to struggle. The Imperatrix stared at the reports with disbelief, turning to rage, turning to something that might have been fear. They're not stopping, Admiral Corthan reported. They're beginning atmospheric entry operations. All across the planet, simultaneously. The Imperatrix watched the displays as human ships began descending through Earth's atmosphere. Ships designed for this moment. Ships that carried humans who had dreamed of breathing Earth's air their entire lives. Then we fight them on the ground, she said. Prepare all surface forces. If they want Earth, they'll have to take it from us city by city, building by building. We'll make them pay for every meter. But as she watched those ships descend, carrying an enemy that had spent 3 centuries preparing for this exact moment, she wondered if even that would be enough. Above Earth, Admiral Chunokuffer stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked at the planet below. After 312 years, humanity was coming home, and nothing in the universe would stop them. The first human dropship entered Earth's atmosphere over what used to be called Kenya. Inside, Lieutenant Marcus Webb gripped his restraints as the ship shook and roared through the air. He was 28 years old. He had been born on the generation ship Forward Unto Dawn. He had never breathed air that wasn't recycled. He had never seen a sky that wasn't projected on a screen. Today that would change. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. Surface defenses are engaging. The dropship rocked as Krithian anti-aircraft fire tried to find its mark. Webb wasn't worried. The ship's armor was designed to withstand the heat of gas giant atmospheres, developed when the fleet had to harvest fuel from Jupiter-like worlds to survive. Regular weapons weren't going to stop them. Through the viewport, Webb caught his first real glimpse of Earth's sky. It was blue. Actually blue. Not simulated or recorded or remembered. Real. His breath caught in his throat. Wow, someone whispered behind him. Several soldiers were crying. The dropship touched down on African soil. The ramp lowered. Lieutenant Webb stood up and walked down with his squad. When his boots touched the ground, he had to stop. The Earth was real, solid. It didn't vibrate with engine noise. It didn't hum with artificial gravity generators. It was just ... sir? One of his soldiers asked. Are you okay? Webb removed his helmet, breaking protocol. His squad gasped. He breathed in. The air was warm and carried smells he didn't have words for. Plants, soil, life. I'm home, he whispered. Then louder, we're home. His squad cheered and several removed their helmets too, breathing Earth's air for the first time in their lives. Some laughed. Some cried. All of them understood they were experiencing something their great-grandparents had died, dreaming about a few kilometers away. Krithian ground forces watched in confusion, as the human soldiers seemed more interested in touching dirt and looking at the sky than advancing. Commander Thelis didn't understand it, but he understood opportunity. All units, advance while they're distracted, he ordered. The Krithian forces moved forward to Eurotanks, armored vehicles, and soldiers in combat suits. They expected the humans to scatter or panic. Instead, the humans calmly put their helmets back on and stood up. What Thelis saw next made him question everything he knew about infantry combat. The human soldiers were wearing armor, but it wasn't like any armor Thelis had seen. It was thick, powered, covered in weapon systems. Each soldier moved like a small tank. When the Krithians opened fire, their weapons sparked off the human armor harmlessly. Then the humans returned fire. The battle was over in minutes. Krithian weapons couldn't penetrate human armor. Human weapons cut through Krithian defenses like they weren't there. But what terrified Thelis most was the way the humans fought a Euro with perfect coordination, with tactics that suggested they knew where every enemy was, with a ferocity that came from centuries of waiting for this moment. His tanks exploded. His vehicles burned. His soldiers fell. Thelis ordered a retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The humans were landing everywhere. Over the ruins of London, the Krithians tried something desperate. They deployed a weapon they'd been developing for 50 years, a Euro, an atmospheric ignition device. If activated, it would turn Earth's atmosphere into a fireball, killing everyone on the surface, Krithian and human alike. The Imperatrix had authorized it. If we can't have Earth, neither can they. Wing Commander Sareth armed the weapon aboard her high-altitude bomber. She felt sick doing it, but orders were orders. Earth would burn. Better that than letting the humans reclaim it. She pressed the activation button. The weapon deployed, releasing a cascade of reactive particles into the upper atmosphere. The chemical reaction began. The sky started to glow. Then the human ships moved. Dozens of atmospheric craft rose to meet the growing fireball. They positioned themselves in a grid formation above the populated areas. As the ignition spread, the ships activated systems that the Krithians couldn't identify. The air itself seemed to bend around the human vessels. Sareth watched in disbelief as the massive explosion simply stopped spreading. The human ships were absorbing it somehow, containing the energy, redirecting it into space. The technology shouldn't be possible. You couldn't just absorb an atmospheric ignition event, but the humans were doing it. They learned how to harvest energy from nebulas. A human voice came over her communication system. Someone had hacked her frequency. When you're traveling between stars for centuries, you learn to use every energy source you can find. Your weapon is powerful, but we've been drinking from stars to survive. This is nothing. The voice paused. Land your craft. Surrender. You've lost. Sareth looked at her fuel gauge. She had maybe 10 minutes of flight time left. She looked at the human ships below, their weapons trained on her but not firing. They could have killed her a dozen times but hadn't. She landed. All across Earth, similar scenes played out. Krithian forces that had seemed invincible were simply overwhelmed. Not by numbers or superior firepower alone, but by an enemy that had spent 3 centuries preparing for this exact situation. Every weapon the Krithians deployed had been anticipated. Every tactic had been countered. Every defense had been planned for. In what used to be Tokyo, a Krithian platoon made their stand in a fortified building. They had supplies for weeks, heavy weapons, and a good defensive position. They expected a siege. Instead, a single human soldier walked up to their front entrance. She was small, even for a human, her armor painted with symbols the Krithians didn't recognize. She knocked on the door. "We can do this easy or hard," she called out in perfect Krithian. "Easy is you walk out with your hands up. Hard is we come in." The platoon commander, a veteran named Kelthus, laughed. "You and what army?" "Just me," the human said. "But I really hope you choose hard." Kelthus ordered his soldiers to fire through the door. Hundreds of rounds poured through the metal. When they stopped, the human was still standing there, her armor showing not even a scratch. "Hard it is," she said, and disappeared, not ran away, disappeared like she'd never been there. Kelthus felt the temperature in the room drop. His soldiers started shouting as their sensors went crazy. The human appeared behind their lines, inside the building, having walked through the walls somehow. She moved like a ghost, her armor allowing her to phase through solid matter. The fight lasted 30 seconds. When it was over, every Krithian soldier was unconscious, disarmed, and zip-tied. None were dead. The human stood in the center of the room, surveying her work. "We learned a lot out there in the dark," she said to the unconscious soldiers. "You should have left us alone." By the end of the first day, humans controlled the skies above Earth. By the end of the second day, they controlled every major landing zone. By the third day, Krithian forces were retreating to fortified cities, abandoning the countryside entirely. The Imperatrix watched the reports with growing horror. They had prepared for a military invasion? They had prepared for orbital bombardment. They had prepared for a long, grinding war of attrition. They hadn't prepared for an enemy that could walk through walls, absorb atmospheric explosions, and shrug off weapons that could destroy tanks. They hadn't prepared for soldiers who fought like every battle was personal, because it was. This wasn't just a military campaign for the humans. It was a homecoming 3 centuries in the making. Admiral Chunokoffer broadcast another message, this time to the Krithian civilians on Earth. "We don't want to kill you," she said. "We want our world back. We're setting up evacuation zones. Take what you can carry. Ships will take you to Krithian space. You have 1 week." She paused, her face showing on screens across the planet. 300 years ago, you gave us the same choice. Flee or die? We fled. We survived. We came back. Now you face the same choice. I suggest you choose wisely. In the fortified city built over the ruins of Beijing, the Imperatrix made her decision. She would not flee. She would not surrender. If Earth was to be lost, it would be lost fighting. She recalled every remaining force to the capital. If the humans wanted Earth, they would have to take it from her personally. She didn't understand that she was playing into exactly what the humans expected. 3 centuries of planning meant they'd anticipated this moment too. The final battle was coming. And the Krithians had already lost. The city the Krithians had built over Beijing was a fortress in every sense. 50 kilometers across, surrounded by walls, 30 meters high and 10 meters thick. Energy shields covered it like a dome. Underground bunkers stretched deep into the earth, filled with supplies, weapons, and the last organized Krithian military force on the planet. 2 million. Krithian soldiers and civilians had retreated here for the final stand. The human forces surrounded the city, but didn't attack. Instead, they did something the Krithians found more disturbing than any assault. They celebrated. All around the fortress, human soldiers planted flags. Not military flags, but personal ones. Families who had died out in the dark were remembered with handmade banners. Ships were named and honored. Children born in space were brought down to touch soil for the first time. Soldiers didn't dig trenches a euro, they planted seeds. They collected water from streams. They lay on the ground and stared at clouds. Commander Velthas watched from the fortress walls with growing unease. Why aren't they attacking? His second-in-command had no answer. The humans had them surrounded, but seemed in no hurry to finish the war. It was psychological warfare at its finest, and it was working. Every Krithian soldier who looked outside the walls saw enemies who were happy, who were home, who had already won in every way that mattered. 3 days into the siege, Admiral Chunokoffer arrived personally. Her shuttle landed just outside weapon range. She stepped out alone, no armor, no visible weapons, and walked toward the main gate. Velthas received urgent messages from a dozen officers asking permission to fire. He denied them all. Something about the Admiral's calm walk suggested that killing her would be the worst mistake they could make. Chunokoffer stopped 100 meters from the gate and spoke. Her voice was amplified somehow, reaching every ear in the fortress. "I want to tell you a story," she began. 312 years ago, my great-great-grandmother was 8 years old. Her name was Amara-chan. She lived in a suburb of Lagos. She had a dog named Pepper and a best friend named Idao. She went to school, played soccer, and dreamed of becoming a doctor. The Krithian soldiers listened despite themselves. Then your ships arrived, Chun Okafor continued. The evacuation was chaos. Amara was separated from her parents in the rush. She never saw them again. She made it onto a transport ship with her grandmother. They fled into space with millions of others, not knowing where they were going or if they'd survive. Chun Okafor's voice remained steady. But there was steel underneath. Amara grew up on a ship called the Long March. She never became a doctor, because there were no medical schools on refugee ships. She became a maintenance technician instead, keeping the life support systems running. She had 2 children on that ship. She died at 63 when a reactor breach exposed her to radiation while she was fixing a coolant leak. She saved 400 people that day. She never saw Earth again. The fortress was silent now. Everyone was listening. Her daughter, my great-grandmother, spent her entire life on ships. She had 3 children. One died from a disease we didn't have the facilities to cure. She never saw Earth. Her daughter, my grandmother, never saw Earth. My mother never saw Earth. I never saw Earth until 6 days ago, when I was 64 years old. 4 generations of my family lived and died dreaming of a home they couldn't have. Chun Okafor looked up at the fortress walls, making eye contact with soldiers watching her. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand. Every human in this fleet has a story like mine. Every single one. 300 years of stories about families broken, lives lived in exile, children who died having never touched real soil or breathed real air. 300 years of grief and longing and determination. She paused. You can't win this. Not because we have better weapons, though we do. Not because we have better tactics, though we do. You can't win because you're fighting for orders, for territory, for empire. We're fighting to go home. And nothing in the universe is stronger than that. Then the bombshell. We know about the bunkers, Chun Okafor said quietly. The hidden facilities where you kept the humans you found. The descendants of those who never made it off Earth. We know you have 1 million of them in your deepest vaults. We know you're planning to use them as hostages. Velphus felt his blood run cold. That was supposed to be secret. Their ultimate leverage. How did she know? We've known for 6 months, Chun Okafor continued. We intercepted your communications long before we entered the system. We know where they are. We know how many guards you have. We know everything, she smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. You can kill 1 million people, but you cannot kill the 100 billion humans coming home. You cannot kill the determination of a species that spent 3 centuries in the dark, staying alive on hope alone. And when we dig you out of your Holessa Euro, and we will a Euro, we will remember every single face of every human you harmed. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Your Imperatrix thinks this fortress can hold. It can't. Your generals think you can wait us out. You can't. Your empire thinks reinforcements are coming. They're not. We've positioned fleets at every point between here and Krithian space. No one is coming to save you. Chun Okafor turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing. Tell your Imperatrix that she's out of time. The hostages will be free within 48 hours. Not because you'll release them, because we're coming to get them. She walked back to her shuttle and left. Velphus stood on the wall, feeling the weight of impending defeat settle on his shoulders. Around him, soldiers who had been confident now looked uncertain. Fear was spreading that night. The humans proved Chun Okafor's words true. The bunkers holding human captives were deep underground, accessible only through heavily guarded tunnels. The Krithians had sensors everywhere, guards at every junction. Blast doors that could withstand nuclear weapons. None of it mattered. Team of 12 human special forces soldiers simply appeared inside the deepest bunker. No alarms, no sensor warnings. One moment the guards were at their posts. The next they were unconscious on the floor. The human soldiers moved like ghosts, their advanced technology allowing them to phase through solid matter, to bend light around themselves. To move with silence that was almost supernatural, they reached the chambers where humans had been kept in stasis for decades. Descendants of those left behind during the evacuation. The soldiers began waking them carefully, one by one. When the first captive opened her eyes and saw the armored human standing over her, she started to cry. "It's okay," the soldier said gently, removing his helmet. "We're human. We're here to take you home." "Home?" the woman whispered. "But Eartha Euro is ours again," the soldier said. "We came back. We came back for all of you." Similar scenes played out in bunkers across the fortress complex. By dawn, every human captive was free, teleported to safety behind human lines. The Crithians found empty chambers and unconscious guards. Their final leverage was gone. The Imperatrix received the report in stunned silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. "How? How did they get through?" "We don't know, Your Radiance," Admiral Corthan admitted. "Our sensors showed nothing." One moment the humans were outside. The next they were inside, everywhere at once. It's like they walked through the walls. The Imperatrix looked at him with something like despair. "What are we fighting?" "The people we made homeless," Corthan said quietly. "The people we thought would die quietly in the dark. We created this enemy. We gave them 300 years to become something we can't stop." Outside the fortress, the freed humans were reunited with their rescuers. Families separated by centuries. People who had been kept in stasis meeting descendants of those who fled. There was crying, laughing, and disbelief. And through it all, every freed human asked the same question. "Did we really take Earth back?" And every soldier gave the same answer. "Yes, we're home." The Imperatrix stood in her command center, looking at the fortress walls on the displays. Human forces surrounded them completely now. No escape, no reinforcements. No hope. She made her decision. "All forces, prepare for final defense. If we're going to fall, we fall fighting. Let the humans remember that the Crithian Dominion did not surrender." Admiral Chun Okoffer received word of the Imperatrix's decision and nodded. She'd expected this. Pride was the same across all species. "Begin the final assault," she ordered. "But remember, Euro, once we take this city, the war is over. Earth is ours again. Let's bring our people home." The siege of Beijing was about to end. And with it, 312 years of exile would come to a close. The final battle for Earth began at dawn on the 21st day after humanity's return. The fortress city over Beijing held 2 million Crithian defenders and the last organized resistance to human reclamation. The Imperatrix herself stood in the central command tower, watching her sensors as human forces took position around the walls. "They're not massing for an assault," her tactical officer reported. "They're just waiting." The Imperatrix understood. The humans were giving them one last chance to surrender. Pride made her want to refuse. Common sense told her that pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "All units, weapons free," she ordered. "If they come, we fight." The humans came, but not as the Crithians expected. There was no massive bombardment, no wave of attackers throwing themselves at the walls. Instead, the assault was surgical, precise, and relentless. Human engineers approached the walls and deployed devices the Crithians had never seen. The energy shields flickered and died section by section, as the humans used technology designed to disrupt power systems on a fundamental level. When Crithian forces tried to stop them, they found themselves facing soldiers in armor that made them nearly invincible. A Crithian captain named Seltos led a counterattack with 50 troops. They had heavy weapons, good training, and desperation. They met a squad of 12 human soldiers at the northern wall breach. The battle lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, all 50 Crithian soldiers were unconscious but alive, and the 12 humans hadn't taken a single casualty. Seltos woke up in a human medical tent an hour later. A young human medic was checking his injuries. "Why?" Seltos asked. "Why didn't you kill us?" The medic looked at him with tired eyes. Because killing you doesn't get us our planet back any faster. We're here to reclaim Earth, not to massacre everyone on it. You can leave when you surrender. We just want you to leave. Similar scenes repeated across the fortress. The humans weren't fighting to destroy a Euro, they were fighting to reclaim. Every Crithian soldier who surrendered was treated, fed, and prepared for evacuation. Every soldier who fought was disabled, not killed. Whenever possible, it was almost worse than facing an enemy that wanted them dead. The humans were showing them mercy while simultaneously crushing their resistance. The battle progressed in stages. Week 1 saw the outer walls breached in a dozen places. Week 2 saw human forces in the city streets, fighting building by building. Week 3 saw the Crithian defenders pushed back to the final stronghold, the central fortress where the Imperatrix commanded. The Imperatrix watched her empire crumble around her. Every report was another defeat, another retreat, another position lost. Her forces were fighting bravely, but bravery meant nothing against an enemy that had been preparing for this moment for 3 centuries. On the 18th day of the siege, Admiral Chun Okafor appeared on her screen. Not as a threat or a demand, but as an invitation. "Your Radiance," Chun Okafor said, her tone formal but not hostile. "I want to meet with you. Face to face. One leader to another. No weapons. No guards. Just us," the Imperatrix almost refused. Then she looked at the tactical displays showing her shrinking territory, her dwindling forces, her lost cause. And she agreed. They met in a neutral building halfway between the lines. Once a Crithian administrative center, now empty and silent. The Imperatrix arrived with her honor guard, which stayed outside. Chun Okafor came alone. The 2 leaders sat across from each other in an empty office, the sounds of distant fighting echoing through the walls. "You could have killed me a dozen times," the Imperatrix said. "Why haven't you?" "Because killing you serves no purpose," Chun Okafor replied. "I don't hate you personally. I hate what your people did to mine. I hate 300 years of exile. I hate that my family died never knowing home. But killing you doesn't fix any of that?" The Imperatrix studied the human admiral. She was old, her hair gray, her face lined with age and responsibility. But her eyes were sharp and held something the Imperatrix recognized a Euro, the absolute conviction of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. "You've already won," the Imperatrix admitted. "My forces are broken. My empire has abandoned us here. We can fight for another week, maybe 2, but the outcome is certain. So why this meeting?" "Because I want you to understand," Chun Okafor said. "I want you to take a message back to your empire. I want them to know what they created when they forced us to flee." She leaned forward. "For 3 centuries, every human ship held regular assemblies. Every month, we gathered and told stories about Earth. Parents told children about blue skies and green forests. Grandparents shared memories of rain and seasons. We kept Earth alive in our hearts and minds through sheer force of will. Do you understand what that means? Generations who never saw Earth fought to preserve the memory of it. People died holding on to hope for something they'd never experience." The Imperatrix listened, feeling something cold settle in her chest. "We didn't just survive out there," Chun Okafor continued. "We built. We learned. We unified in a way that would have been impossible on Earth. Every human, regardless of old nations or old differences, became part of one family. One purpose. One dream. Your people created something unique in the universe, Euro, an entire species focused on a single goal for 300 years. She paused. "You need to understand this because your empire needs to understand it. Never make humans homeless again. Never force them to wander, because if you do, they'll come back. And when they do, they'll be stronger than you can imagine." The Imperatrix felt the weight of defeat fully for the first time. "What do you want from me?" "Leave," Chun Okafor said simply. "Take your people and go. We'll provide transport ships. We'll give you safe passage to Crithian space. We'll even provide supplies for the journey. Just leave Earth, leave our solar system, and carry my message to your emperor and your high command. And if we refuse?" If we fight to the last? Chonokoffer's expression didn't change. Then you'll die and someone else will carry the message. I'd prefer you live to tell it. Survivors make better witnesses than martyrs. The Imperatrix stood. She had lived her entire life as a conqueror, a leader of an empire that spanned dozens of worlds. She'd never surrendered, never retreated, never accepted defeat. Today, for the first time and the last time, she would. I'll order the evacuation, she said quietly. But I want one promise. The civilians and soldiers who surrender a euro, they won't be harmed. You have my word, Chonokoffer replied. We're not here for revenge. We're here to come home. 2 days later, the evacuation began. Prithian soldiers and civilians boarded transport ships provided by the human fleet. True to Chonokoffer's word, they were treated well, given supplies, and sent toward Prithian space with one additional euro, a beacon attached to each ship broadcasting a message in all languages. The message was simple. Earth is claimed. Earth is defended. Earth is eternal. Do not return. The Imperatrix was on the last ship to leave. As it lifted off, she looked down at Earth through the viewport. After 300 years, the planet was returning to its original owners. Part of her felt a loss. Part of her felt something like relief. The war was over. The impossible enemy had one dot as they reached the edge of the solar system. She transmitted one final message to Prithian High Command. It was marked urgent and for the Emperor's eyes only. Do not engage the humans. Do not approach Sol System. They are not Warriorsa Euro. They are something far more dangerous. They are a species that knows what it means to lose everything and what they'll do to get it back. We took their world. They became stronger than worlds. Consider this report a warning. The Prithian Dominion has found its limit. That limit is humanity's home. On Earth, the celebrations began the moment the last Prithian ship left orbit. In cities and forests, on mountains and beaches, humans gathered to experience something their ancestors had dreamed of for 300 years. Lieutenant Webb, who had been among the first to land, stood on a beach in Kenya. He had removed his armor completely and stood barefoot in the sand. The ocean waves touched his feet and he laughed like a child. Around him, thousands of soldiers and civilians were doing the Sania Euro, touching water, feeling sand, breathing air that wasn't recycled. In orbit, engineers began the work of converting warships to colony ships. The fleet that had been built for war would now be transformed for peace. Some ships would remain as defense, but most would be repurposed. Weapons bays became hydroponics facilities. Barracks became schools. Ammunition storage became nurseries. In the ruins of New York, a group of children born on generation ships planted a garden. They had seeds from dozens of worlds the fleet had visited, but they planted Earth seeds first. When the first sprouts appeared 2 weeks later, they called everyone to see. Grown soldiers and engineers came running to watch plants grow in Earth soil, something miraculous and ordinary at the same time. Admiral Chonokoffer stood in what used to be a forest near Seattle. The trees had been damaged during the Prithian occupation, but life was returning. She placed her hand on a tree trunk and felt the rough bark under her palm, real, solid, home. A young officer approached her. Admiral, the fleet conversion is ahead of schedule. Within 6 months, we'll have established permanent settlements in every major region. Good, Chonokoffer said. And the memorial?